right now.
All right, let's try to do some handicapping. I'm sure we'll talk plenty of Vikings before we're done with Jonny Athletic. We'll also get into major Vikings discussion with Ben Lieber at about 4:47. So this hour we'll have lots of football discussion, but there are other things to try to intersperse that are quite timely. And Jonny joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. So you're a big, you're a scouting report guy. You're a guy who believes in some of the analytics, whether it pertains to analyzing players, player production. What kind of analytics can you give us on Kathleen Blatz, Thomas Frazier, and Joseph R. Slights III, who I believe are the three members of the arbitration panel that will ultimately, maybe quickly, determine who will own your favorite basketball team?
Yeah, it's going to be, it's a super interesting situation this week. They had their first hearing today, and it could go all week between Glenn Taylor and Alex Rodriguez and Mark Laurie. To handicap the panel, Kathleen Blatz was chosen by the Taylor side of the equation. Joseph was chosen by A-Rod and Laurie.
Yep. And
Thomas Frazier is kind of like the middle ground one.
Mm-hmm.
And you could kind of infer that, maybe each of the chosen parties will side with the people that chose them, and then eventually Frazier will be the one that casts the deciding vote. I don't know if that simple, but that's how the panel was constructed. And Blatz is local. Joseph is up from out east, I believe, Delaware.
Yep.
And Frazier is local as well. So we'll see how all of that plays in. But that's kind of the dynamics behind how the panel was assembled.
And the way I understand it, like you said, each side gets to sort of go after one, even though there's not supposed to be any conflicts of interest, right? There's not supposed to be any obvious conflicts of interest. Those are the only things that get in the way, that could potentially get in the way. Here's what I'm worried about. Is this home cooking by Taylor? Blatz served in the Minnesota House of Representatives from 79-94. Is there any kind of history between the two of them that might create any, kind of scandal or controversy or conflict after the fact?
Not that I'm aware of, Dan, and I can tell you that both sides' attorneys have, one of their main jobs is to make sure that this is as close to uncompromised as possible, because the only way that the ultimate ruling of the panel could be challenged at all is if one side can make a case that there was a compromised party, that there was some sort of bias, that there was some kind of bad faith, in terms of the deliberations, in terms of the relationships, and all of those things. And so I do think that there was some care given to the selecting of all of them to try to make sure. It would not surprise me. I don't know this to be true, but it would not surprise me if Glenn Taylor picked Kathleen Blatz, believing that she is more sympathetic to whatever his argument is.
Right.
And just like A-Rod Morey chose Slights just for maybe his disposition on how he kind of views these types of cases. But the ruling that will come down within probably the next month is going to be binding. And it's stated in the contract that there's no way to appeal this ruling, that there's no other lawsuits to file unless you have some question about the character and the integrity of the panel. And so I think that would be watched very, very closely from all sides, and you want to avoid that as much as possible.
Do your sources indicate any reason to believe that we could have a ruling within a week, 3 weeks, a month? Do you get any sense of pace on how this is going to go forward?
So, yeah, the way that it was described to me from multiple parties is that there's an expectation that sometime within 30 days.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that is that would prolong the outcome is that all these three panelists have to deliberate, probably individually, but also as a group, to talk things over. And so it could take a while just to get on their schedules and get everything lined up so that they have the time to do that. Presumably, it is possible that everything could be so cut and dried in the testimony that they hear and in the depositions that were filed that a ruling could come sooner than that, maybe next week or that. I'm not anticipating that. It seems like everyone involved is under the understanding that sometime within a month, a little after Thanksgiving or right around that time is kind of the target of when it's expected that a ruling would come down.
Has Vegas, any outlet, posted odds on who will win? I'm being half serious. I'm being half kidding, half serious about it.
No. Yeah, I have not seen any odds, but that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you can bet on everything these days. FanDuel is trying to do everything. And so I should check into that a little bit more because, we get all of these emails from odds makers and stuff on certain games and stuff like that. I would think that it would come across my radar, but it's entirely possible. Because there's going to be one true outcome. You can bet on it, and you can say that, hey, I think this guy's going to win, or I think these guys are going to win, and bet. But I have not, to my knowledge, seen anything on the Mandalay Bay Sportsbook or anything like that just yet.
I'm going to ask you a question I don't think I've asked you before on this subject, although my memory often fails me. What does your gut tell you will be the outcome? What is your gut deep down in the basis of what you know? It's not necessarily you making an editorial judgment on who should be owning the team. What does your gut tell you, if anything?
I will say that as I have labored over this for months and months and talked to as many people as possible and tried to figure out all of the arguments and the case for on both sides of it, I will say, Dan, that it's easier for me to understand exactly what Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry are arguing is the case here. They are saying that the contract stipulates they should have had a 90-day extension to finish all of their going through the NBA approval process and all of those things. They were entitled to that. They did not get that. And that is why Glenn Taylor called this off in bad faith. I've seen that language in the contract. It is kind of in black and white. And so that is easy for me. I got that. Glenn Taylor's argument is more nuanced. It's more that Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry did not meet a series of obligations on their part leading up to the final deadline that nullified their ability to be eligible for this extension. But in the way that the contract is written, all of the legalese, it's harder for me to decipher that as not a legal mind at all, to really look at that and say, yes, I see exactly where they messed up here. And that is why this is a cancelable contract and that Glenn Taylor's in the right for doing this. So, just by virtue of that, I understand what Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez are arguing, and so it's easier for me to see their point. It's a little bit harder for me to get into the weeds on Glenn Taylor's part because there's so many more I's to dot and T's to cross and specifics that are just harder for me to identify.
That's a very good, honest answer. I want to get a pause in because I want to stay on schedule. We got a lot going on this hour. Jonny Athletic back. There's a lot more to cover, including his thoughts on the Vikings game. Meantime, Guardsy?
Fan and two men in a junk truck. Want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with our national cash contest. Second keyword of the afternoon is deposit. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword deposit. Nick Swartzen, the hilarious star of Reno 911 and Grandma's Boy and One of Us, is bringing his side-splitting stand-up to the State Theater. It's on January 10th. Don't miss your chance to hear his outrageous stories and unforgettable jokes live. Tickets are on sale now. All the details at KFAN.com. Keyword calendar.
Jonny Athletic is indeed back with us. Ben Lieber later this hour. Many more Vikings talking points to get to. Ode to a Dead Guy before we're done. Jonny resumes our discussion via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. One follow-up on the Wolves ownership arbitration deal, and I think it's a really good question coming in from 763 guy. Does this arbitration panel look at this as a rule of contract law issue, or do they have the latitude to ignore such? It surprises me how many people, hold on a second, another text has come in as we speak. It surprises me how many people, when this originally took the just give them a break mindset, people don't do $500 million or $1 billion favors. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great point, Dan, that I think is important to emphasize here. I've done some reporting. There's been plenty out there, recently about some of the things that Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry have been working on for if they win the arbitration hearing and the team goes to them. Remember, they still have to get approved by the NBA if they were to win. It's not a rubber stamp. They'd have to go through that process. But assuming they would get out of it, I've talked about they are looking at a new arena. They're looking at kind of addressing the TV option, the local TV option. There's a bunch of things. They've also socked away almost $1 billion to just buy the team outright, right away from Glenn Taylor, and just close it out and do it that way. Those are all things that are important. Those are all things that they are working on, but it really is not going to influence this panel on how they rule. The panel is not going to look at, is Glenn Taylor the best owner for this team? Is Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry the best ownership group for this team? Like, who has the money? All of those things. What they are looking strictly at is who followed the letter of the law when it came to the contract, who is in the right and who is in the wrong. There's going to be no value judgments made on the veracity of either ownership group and what is best for the team going forward. They're going to say, did Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez uphold their end of the bargain, or did they not? And if they didn't, Glenn Taylor keeps the team. If they did, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez get to go. But it's strictly based on the contract itself and the language in that contract.
Real quick, tonight, Wolves back in action against Charlotte. Anthony Edwards, to this point in this young season, 28 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. And he's facing your guy, or actually my guy, Melo, who is averaging 30 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, shooting actually even a little better overall than Ant, not quite as good from three-point range. A nice little individual matchup there in a game that we assume the Wolves are supposed to win.
For sure, yeah. I mean, and Charlotte's been a little frisky lately, so I think tonight is going to be a bit of a challenge because the Timberwolves, let's face it, just have not played well. They haven't played a complete game really all season yet. And so they're still figuring things out. And so I do think that this is a bit of a dangerous game. And, it's clear that Anthony Edwards has leapfrogged LaMelo Ball over the last couple of years when it comes to the star ladder, where,
yes,
where he is on the pecking order in the league. He deserves all of that. He has been dynamic. He's won in the playoffs. He has also been really healthy. LaMelo Ball has not been healthy, but when he has been on the floor, he's been pretty damn good. I mean, he's been in the All-Star game before. He puts up big numbers. Now the question becomes, can LaMelo really affect winning the same way that Ant has in Minnesota? That's going to be what he's going to try to do in Charlotte. But yeah, it's going to be a juicy little matchup. I mean, the Hornets are fun. They run. LaMelo throws lobs from half court, shooting deep threes, and they'll get after it. So it'll be a fun kind of little rivalry game for the two of them tonight.
Did the Vikings win you back last night?
No, they didn't. Certainly they made strides. Defensively, I thought they were much better. But there was a lot of meat left on the bone, I thought. Sam Darnold, with some of the decisions that he makes, he's a tough one, Dan, because, he makes some unbelievable throws in the game. The touchdown to Addison was crazy. The go ball to Jefferson, he's made some great throws, but then he throws into double coverage where it's just like, how can you not see that? And so if you still have that element, there's going to be trepidation, on what's going on. And I do think the defense was better. Certainly, I don't think Joe Flacco played well at all. I didn't like the way that Shane Steichen approached the game offensively for the Colts. So they got a win, which was good. They needed it. They needed to bounce back. But I didn't walk out of U.S. Bank Stadium last night at 1:30 in the morning thinking that they've solved their problems, that they're back, baby, that the hiccups are over. I think they still have some issues to work through.
One other NBA item I want to handle. We probably should do it when we have more time, but I want to get at least your quick reaction to it. And it's always dangerous to ask a media member about a media story, any of us, including me, because we're viewed as not particularly objective, and that generally we're going to defend. We're going to be on the reporter's side over the player's side. Embiid gets into, apparently, he ends up supposedly, according to the report, shoving I think a longtime Philadelphia writer and columnist, now most recently for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Embiid is upset about not just some of the criticism levied by that writer regarding Embiid's availability, but his bringing, at least in an earlier version of the column, bringing in his son and his dead brother. I believe that his son is named after his brother who died tragically. So what did you make of all of that situation? Is that a bridge too far by the commentator? Is it a player who has to understand that he's front and center and he's high profile, and therefore that's part of the game? What did you make of all of that based on what you know?
Yeah, this is a difficult one, Dan, and just in terms of I wasn't in the locker room there I can't believe that we haven't seen video of the altercation at all. I was really surprised about that because when it initially broke, and I think the Philadelphia 76ers, the Inquirer beat writer put out that Joel Embiid just assaulted a reporter, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. What happened? Did he punch him? Or did he even Embiid is a huge guy. Did he just shove him across the room? Was it violent? And then as the night went on and as there was more versions of the story that came out, it does seem like it was more of it was a shove, but I don't know how egregious it was. Now, should a player ever make physical contact with a reporter like that? I don't think so. No. That said, I read the story and I read the version with the family members in it. And I thought it was out over the line. I did think he crossed the line with it. I understand why Joel Embiid was really upset with it. I think that talking to people about the columnist, Marcus Hayes, he is a guy that likes to agitate and likes to kind of get out there and get under people's skin. And, so was this a kind of a mess around and find out kind of situation? It might have been. That said, I just don't think anything good ever comes from a physical confrontation like that. Joel Embiid had every right to berate him, to get in his face, to yell at him. But as soon as you make physical contact, you kind of lose the high ground in the battle. And I wish I could have seen that part of it, because if it was just a little tap on the shoulder, kind of push and right, saying I'm less worried about it. If it was a 7-foot, 290-pound dude, really flexing on it, that's a little bit more of a scenario to be concerned about.
Speaking of flexing, did I detect in you from earlier today, in the wake of the news that for the first time, The Athletic, now as part of the New York Times, has turned a profit? Did I detect a little bit of Christian Braun-like flexing from Jonny Athletic directed at a specific media individual, or am I shock-jocking that particular story?
Wow, I'm just impressed that you're in my mentions and pick this stuff up, Dan. You have a radar for it. Well done on your part. That's good reporting. Yeah, I'll just be upfront with it. When I left the AP for The Athletic, it just so happened that on the same day that I officially joined the product, our founders had a story in the New York Times that they were really puffing their chest out, and they probably said a few things that went a little over the line in terms of the way that we were going to compete against newspapers. and treat people better and just wait them out and dominate the industry. And at that time, that particular person who works for the Associated Press was very smarmy and said, well, let's revisit this in 5 years. And there was another person that was directly in the sports department that said, I give it 18 months. And I took that personally. And I remember that stuff. And so when we have become, in my opinion, the best sports outlet from a digital print perspective in the country, I'm gonna feel good about that we've crossed the Rubicon. We've become profitable. We are the New York Times sports section. I think we've accomplished a lot in 7 years since Russo and I came over here. And so I let them know about it every once in a while just to make sure that, that they were seen at that time, and I'll keep seeing them on our way past them.
I love it. I just love it.
You could take the boy out of Blaine, but you can't take the Blaine out of the boy.
Love it. I just love it. Oh, it's so juicy and so good. I was pretty sure at first, then I thought, well, maybe I'm taking it the way I want to, because in my world, it's more interesting that way. But I had a hunch when I saw the AP part that might indeed be part of the reality. So that was very well played. Lastly, let me clear the air one thing before we go, because Dave in Illinois texts. He says, Dan, can you ask Jonny how he feels about you calling him and other media jackals out on sermons about the Wolves' schedule loss? Now, I did go after the schedule loss concept because I despise it. I did not know you had apparently used that term. So my intention wasn't, quote unquote, to call you out.
Be careful. He's hot today.
But I'm afraid now I'm going to get on your bad side. And in 5 years, there's going to be a text, a tweet that's going to remind me of this. But my point is, I'm on Finchie's side. I don't think it serves any purpose. I know they got in at 4 a.m., blah, blah, and blah. But I think it becomes too easy of a term to just use every time out, and I'm not exactly sure what it accomplishes. That's my only point.
Yeah, look, I will say this, like in terms of my explaining it as a schedule loss, I had several tweets throughout the night talking about how, yes, I know they are tired, but they should be playing better. And that is the truth. Like, they should have gone into San Antonio and been much more competitive.
Absolutely.
They did not put up any fight defensively. All of those things. I understood that, hey, they are going to be really tired. They are going to be gassed. It was an emotional win over Denver. And then they come in and get in late and you're playing the Spurs and you're playing Wembanyama, and that's difficult. So I'm trying to be empathetic to their situation that way. And because I do think that there are games that the schedule just works against you and you're stuck in the mud. I like that Finchie started the game out trying to go for the win and saying, look, we don't subscribe to this. Like, that's good. Like, I thought that they were my issue with it was, as the game went on, it was clear they were dead. They just didn't have the legs. Rudy was dead. Ant was dead. They weren't moving around. So I would have just liked to seen the young guys play a little bit more in that game and just like understand that, hey, get these guys some experience. You don't have to like wave the white flag right at the beginning, but it was there for them. And they didn't have it. And so I understand why they didn't have it, but the best teams battle through that. The Wolves are not a very great team right now. No. They're trying to find it. And so that's the biggest issue.
Outstanding work. Thanks, Jonny. We will chat next week.
All right. Thanks, Dan. John
Krasinski helping us out on too many subjects, man. We could have gone easily an hour with him, but we've got Ben Lieber later this hour. A short break now.
Fan. This football season, Bell Bank is giving one fan listener each week $1,000 to pay it forward to a charity of their choice. Go to KFAN.com, keyword contest to learn more. Ben Lieber is coming up next segment, so this will be kind of a quickie to give him the proper time to opine and analyze the Vikings game. Don't forget, it is, as the fan has learned, Election Day tomorrow, although many of you have already voted. Numbers are through the roof in the great state of Minnesota. I'm going to try to keep to this today because tomorrow is actually Election Day. The only comment I want to make on the election today, because this, for me, is, with all
the nonsense and all the hyperventilation and all of the twists and turns that we've seen through this election cycle, it really boils down to this. This is what, regardless of what one might think of the person running against Donald J. Trump and whether that's the person that you really want to vote for, I offer this. It was stated on August 2nd, 2023. So that's a while ago, right? But I can't find anything that surpasses it in explaining what I believe in my mind and in my heart tells the story of this, or should tell the story of this election day. And it comes from former Vice President Mike Pence. Aug 2, 2023. I had no right to overturn the election. And on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. Put him over the Constitution. I chose the Constitution, and I always will. Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put themselves over the Constitution should never be the president of the United States again. But what the president maintained that day, and frankly has said over and over again over the last 2.5 years, is completely false. I dismissed it out of hand, but sadly, the president was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers that kept telling him what his itching ears wanted to hear. Aug 2, 2023. And a year and many months later, it still stands for me as the essential breaking off point that some of us, me included, simply cannot get past. That's not necessarily an endorsement of who's running, anybody who's running against him. But it remains the fundamental, crucial point that regardless of all the other issues that are buzzing pretty much everywhere, I simply cannot and will not get past. Let's return to the toy department with Ben Lieber. That's